The skyscraper clock read 9:17. It was one of those mornings that seemed to shine too bright, as if the sun had made it its mission to polish the building windows with its light. But the air remained cruel, dry, and freezing. The cold seeped through dress pants and wool coats, and even more so through the gaps in the torn jacket that Emily Carter wore as her shield against the world. She walked barefoot on the pristine sidewalk of Summit Drive, where the sidewalks never knew trash and cars gleamed like mobile mirrors. Her tangled hair whipped with each gust of wind, and the passers-by in suits with coffee in hand barely noticed her. A girl like her, thin, dirty, with tired eyes, had no place in this world of steel and figures, but she kept walking with firm steps, as if someone were pushing her from within. In her hands she clutched an object she had guarded like treasure, even when she had nothing else, an old faded bank card with her mother's name written in marker on the back, the last thing her mother left her before leaving forever. "Don't ever lose it, sweetheart," her mother had told her, voice trembling from the shelter bed. "That's your future." Emily was hungry. She'd gone 2 days without eating anything solid, had only drunk some water from a public fountain. Hunger churned in her stomach like a restless animal, but something told her she shouldn't give up that day. She stopped in front of an immense building with black marble columns and revolving doors that gleamed as if they were from another planet. Above the entrance, a golden sign read, "National Bank of Summit Ridge." She swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and pushed through the door. Inside, everything was white light and shining floors. People in impeccable clothes walked from one side to another, some talking on phones, others watching giant screens where numbers rose and fell. It smelled of expensive perfume and fresh brewed coffee. Nobody greeted her. Nobody stopped. Emily moved forward, looking at everything as if it were a forbidden museum. She reached the service counter. A woman in her mid-30s with thin glasses and a professional smile watched her with surprise. "Hi, are you lost?" the woman asked, leaning down a bit. I want to know if this card works," Emily answered, extending it with trembling hands. The woman took the plastic and looked at it with suspicion. "Do you have someone with you? Your mum or dad?" Emily shook her head. "I'm alone." The employee hesitated. Her name was Jennifer Hayes, and she'd been working there for years. She'd seen it all, but this girl with torn clothes and eyes as big as the winter sky stirred something in her chest. She checked the card on her computer. Nothing came up. The system didn't recognize the number. She frowned. "This is a very old card. It looks like it's not in our database, but there's a section where I could look it up." "Only the director has access," she murmured, more to herself than to the girl. She glanced toward the back of the bank. Behind a tinted window was the office of Richard Mitchell, the financial shark who pulled the strings of half the country from that desk. Nobody entered without an appointment, without being on the schedule, without permission. Jennifer made a decision in that instant. "Come with me, Emily. Let's see if someone can help you." They crossed the hallways under the confused stares of executives. The girl contrasted like a stray cat in a boardroom. Jennifer knocked gently on the door. "Yes?" said a deep voice from inside. Jennifer entered. Emily stood at the entrance. Richard Mitchell was a man of about 50, with hair perfectly slicked back, a tailored suit, and an expression that could melt steel. He looked up and frowned. "What's this?" "It's a girl, Richard. She brought a very old bank card. The system doesn't recognize it, but I thought maybe—" "You thought I'm customer service now?" he interrupted, but then his gaze stopped on Emily. Something in the way she looked at him, without fear but with deep need, made him hesitate. "Give it to me, just for a moment," he said, taking the card. He entered the number into his personal terminal, an armored computer connected to the most exclusive networks of the financial system. The cursor blinked. A few seconds later, the screen lit up. Richard remained motionless. Jennifer noticed that the tycoon's expression had changed. He no longer had that playful arrogance he always wore. His face was a mixture of shock, concern, and respect. "What's wrong?" Jennifer asked in a low voice. Richard didn't respond. He just slowly turned the screen toward her. The numbers were so high that Jennifer had to blink several times to believe it. This is a private account, protected. It has more zeros than I've ever seen in my life, she whispered. Richard looked at Emily with different eyes. She was no longer the dirty girl who had burst into his world of luxury. She was something more, an enigma, a threat, a miracle. The girl, oblivious to the zeros and bank security, only asked, "Can I take out something to eat?" Richard took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, didn't know what to answer. The hum of the computer filled the office in complete silence. Richard couldn't stop staring at the screen, as if the numbers were part of a miscalculated nightmare. It wasn't just the amount that unsettled him, though it was enough to buy entire buildings in the same district, but the name that appeared when the account was opened. Walter Harrison. Jennifer, still standing, watched Emily out of the corner of her eye. The girl was now sitting in a small chair by the window, devouring a ham sandwich that Jennifer herself had gone downstairs to buy. The girl didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just ate with a slowness that mixed hunger with distrust. Richard stood up, walked to the minibar and poured a glass of whiskey. Even though it was barely 10:42, he took a short, bitter sip. "Walter Harrison," he murmured finally. "Did you know him?" Jennifer asked, approaching. "Of course I knew him," he responded without taking his eyes off the history. "He was one of the richest men we ever served here, but he disappeared off the map years ago. I thought he died without heirs." Emily looked up, her lips still shining with butter. "Is that man the one who left me money?" Richard didn't know what to tell her. He approached and crouched in front of her, lowering for the first time to the level of her chair. "Your mum, did she talk about him?" Emily shook her head. "She just told me to keep that card, that it was important. She never told me about any rich man." Richard returned to his chair, pressing the bridge of his nose with his fingers. Then he typed a few more lines. The screen changed, showing encrypted files, old photos, and a scan of a notarized document dated more than 10 years ago. It clearly stated, "In the name of Emily Rose Carter, irrevocable funds, total inheritance in case of death." "This doesn't make sense," he said to himself, but it did. In fact, everything fit together too well. 11 years earlier, the community center clock read 8:15 at night. In the small room, with salmon-colored walls and a ceiling fan that barely turned, Walter Harrison struggled to keep his eyes open. His skin looked pale, his body thin, almost defeated. He was an old man with more money than life, and yet, in that simple corner of the South Side, he found something money never gave him: companionship. Sitting beside him, with a cup of hot tea in her hands, was Susan Carter, Emily's mother. Her voice was soft, almost like a song. "Tomorrow I'm bringing Emily. She loves reading with you. She asked me to bring the book about the traveling animals." Walter smiled weakly. "Your daughter has a different light, like you. I don't know what I did to deserve you both." "You don't have to deserve us, Mr. Harrison. We're here because we want to be." The old man in that instant knew the end was near, not from pain, but from clarity. He had spent decades building an empire of steel, numbers, and silence. But only in that simple bed, with a volunteer nurse and her daughter with baby teeth, did he feel truly human. The next day, he went to the bank and created the account. He named it to Emily, in secret. He did it without notice, without papers to pass through greedy lawyers. He left only one instruction: genuine love deserves a legacy. Present, Richard stared at Susan's name in the system. She didn't appear as an employee or as a client. She was only mentioned in a small attached file note: volunteer assistance, emotional care, no compensation. "This is crazy," he said, more to himself than to Jennifer. "No," she responded softly. "It's justice. Maybe the world owed that girl something." Emily finished her sandwich and wiped her hands on the sleeve of her jacket. "So I have money. I don't have to sleep on the street anymore." Richard was speechless. He could see hope growing in Emily's eyes, but also responsibility falling on his shoulders like a slab. A fund like that, protected, powerful, with international investments, could move mountains. The girl had more financial power than many governors. If anyone else found out, they might try to take advantage of her. Not just street thieves, men in ties, politicians, advisors from the bank itself. Richard stood up, walked to the window, and observed the city from above. Tiny cars. People who seemed insignificant from his height. "Emily," he said without turning, "what you have isn't just money. It's power. And power always attracts danger." "Are they going to take it away?" the girl asked with a broken voice. Richard turned. Something in his expression changed. For an instant, the arrogant banker disappeared, and in his place remained only a man who had forgotten what it was like to have faith. "No, kiddo, I won't let that happen." Jennifer looked at him surprised, not by his words but by the tone in which he said them. Richard returned to the desk, printed a couple of forms and called legal. "I'm going to designate a special committee to protect this account, and I want reinforced surveillance on the digital file. Nobody else should know what she has, not yet." "What are you planning to do, Richard?" Jennifer asked. He was silent for a few seconds. Then he responded, "Protect her, for now." But deep down, he knew that the simple fact that Emily had crossed those doors had already set everything in motion. The aroma of freshly made breakfast floated in the air. Emily, wrapped in a clean hoodie and new sneakers, sat in front of a table where a plate of scrambled eggs and toast waited for her. Jennifer had insisted she eat well, while the rest of the bank continued its frantic routine, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Richard, on the other hand, wasted no time. As soon as he finished the morning meeting with his security team, he made 3 urgent calls, one to the legal department, another to his personal tax advisor, and one more, the most dangerous, to one of the bank's board members, Marcus Chen. "She's a girl, yes," Richard told him in a low voice as he walked through one of the side hallways. "But legally she's the account holder. The account was registered more than a decade ago. It's legitimate. And you think you're going to let a girl with no pedigree influence the national financial system?" Marcus responded, his voice dry. "I'm handling the situation." "Do it fast, Richard, because if that account goes public, we'll all fall." He hung up. Richard knew it wasn't just about protecting Emily. It was about protecting the balance of a system based on power, control, and secrets. Meanwhile, Jennifer Hayes took Emily to a small temporary office they had set up for her. On the way, the girl observed every person who passed with attention. Her instinct, sharp as a street cat's, was starting to notice the subtle changes, the curious looks, the murmurs, the way some employees avoided making eye contact with her. "Why is everyone looking at me weird?" she suddenly asked. "Because they don't understand how someone so small can have so much value," Jennifer answered with a smile. Emily twisted her mouth. "I don't like it. I feel like they're waiting for me to mess up." Jennifer crouched in front of her and put a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't mess up, Emily. You're just receiving what was left to you out of love. But money changes people, and that's why you have to stay alert. Do you trust me?" Emily hesitated only a second before nodding firmly. "Yes, but I don't trust everyone else." That afternoon, Richard introduced her to a young, charismatic lawyer named Kevin Walsh. He told her he was her legal representative and would handle all her needs. "Will you protect me?" Emily asked. "Of course," Kevin said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm here for you." But that night, while Jennifer was reviewing some documents, she discovered something that chilled her blood. Richard had authorized a fund transfer from Emily's account to an external investment fund, hiding the operation under the name Asset Restructuring. It was a risky move. If the investment failed, Emily could lose millions, and no one had asked her opinion. Jennifer didn't know who to turn to, until she remembered an old photo in Susan's wallet, Emily's mother. In it appeared a grey-haired man with thick glasses, hugging her during a celebration at the community center. Written on the back by hand, "Thanks, Tony, for being more than a lawyer, for being a friend." Hours later, in a neighborhood on the south side, Jennifer was knocking on the door of a modest house. A man of about 60 opened with an unfriendly expression. "Tony Bradford? And you are?" "My name is Jennifer Hayes. I'm here about Emily Carter. She was Susan Carter's daughter." The man froze. Then, without saying anything, he let her in. Jennifer told him everything: the bank, the account, Richard, the attempt to move the money. Tony listened in silence, only clenching his fists from time to time. "Susan was like a sister to me," he finally said. "If that bastard Richard is trying to steal from the daughter of the only good woman I knew in this world, then we're going to stop him." That same night, Jennifer and Tony returned to the bank with legal documents, review requests, and an urgent request for an internal audit. Richard was waiting for them in his office, standing without his jacket, with his tie loosened and a steel expression. Seeing Tony, he couldn't hide a grimace of disgust. "Well, well, Tony Bradford, I thought you'd disappeared with the dinosaurs. And I thought you'd sold out completely, but here you are, playing tycoon with a child's fortune. Nothing I did is illegal." "No, but it is disgusting," Jennifer said, throwing the documents she'd found onto the desk. "You moved the money without informing the account holder. You concealed information. You brought in a lawyer who answers to you, not to her." Richard took a deep breath. Then he approached the window, watching the city lights, as if looking for answers in the buildings. "Everything has a price," he finally said. "Even innocence." He turned toward them, his gaze icy. "Do you really think a 9-year-old girl can handle a fortune like this without becoming a target for every vulture in the country? I'm doing what you can't, protecting her from the shadows." "Protecting her? Or using her?" Tony asked, crossing his arms. Richard didn't respond. "Don't fool yourself, Richard," Jennifer added, taking a step forward. "Emily's not alone, and you can't decide for her anymore." The silence that followed was louder than any shout. Richard knew the war had begun. Emily's face appeared on television for the first time on a Tuesday morning. The story leaked like a whisper on social media, but within hours it became a national trend. The street girl who inherited millions. The networks wasted no time looking for her. Some wanted an interview, others an exclusive photo. Cameras swarmed outside the National Bank of Summit Ridge, where weeks before Emily had entered with bare feet and an empty gaze. Now, she wasn't alone. Walking beside her were Tony Bradford, with his firm step of an old legal wolf, and Jennifer Hayes, who had become not only her protector, but her most honest voice. Together they initiated the process to freeze Richard Mitchell's actions, accusing him of unauthorized financial movements, abuse of power, and conflict of interest. The battle was hard. Richard, with all his experience and contacts, tried to hold on to control. He declared in interviews that everything he did was for the girl's good, and that Jennifer and Tony misinterpreted his intentions, but public opinion was no longer on his side. Videos of Emily at the bank, eating with trembling hands, Susan's statements in old community center documents, and the coldness of executives toward the girl broke the country's heart. Women, men, young people, everyone rallied to defend her. "She represents us," a journalist wrote in a viral article, "not because of her wealth, but because of her origin. Because we all at some point felt abandoned and dreamed that something unexpected would change our lives." The bank's board, under pressure it couldn't ignore, acted quickly. Richard Mitchell was forced to resign, and he did so in silence. There were no press conferences, no farewell honors. He just left his office one rainy night, escorted by 2 private guards. He carried in his hand an envelope sealed with red wax. The next day that envelope reached Emily's hands. Jennifer opened it with her. Inside was a single handwritten page and a small card with gold edges. The letter said, "Emily, your mother was one of the few people who saw me as a human being and not as a source of money. In my final days, she cared for me without expecting anything. She read to me, sang to me, talked to me, as if there was still some life left in me. You, barely a child, sat at my feet drawing while I coughed up my entire life. You smiled without fear. That day I decided that if I couldn't leave children, I would leave a legacy, but not to create another fortune, but to remember that genuine love can't be paid for, it's inherited. I hope this money doesn't change you. I hope you use it so others also believe that sometimes the world can be better. With eternal affection, Walter Harrison." Emily didn't cry. She remained silent for a long time with the letter in her hands. Then she said, "I want to do something with this." "What do you mean?" Tony asked. "I want to help those who are where I was. Girls, boys who sleep on cardboard, who don't have a mom or a sandwich or anyone who sees them. I want them to have a chance too." Jennifer smiled at her. Tony nodded, proud. That's how the Harrison Carter Foundation was born. In the following weeks, it was legally formalized. An old mansion on the south side was rented, remodeled, and in less than 3 months it opened its doors as a shelter, school and dining hall for homeless children. Emily attended every day, not as a public figure, but as one more person. She served food, listened to stories, helped paint the walls. The country adopted her as a symbol of hope. A year later, the morning was warm, different from that first time. Emily, now with clean hair, a backpack on her back and a calm smile, stood in front of the National Bank of Summit Ridge. The guards already knew her. Some even greeted her with affection. She looked up at the sky. The buildings were still tall. The noise of luxury cars continued, as if the world hadn't changed. But she had. Crossing the street, she saw a group of children, dirty, with torn clothes, just like she used to be. One of them stared at her, as if wondering if she was real. Emily put her hand in her pocket and pulled out a cookie wrapped in paper. She crossed the street and gave it to him. "Are you hungry?" The boy nodded with distrust. "I was too," she told him. "But someone believed in me." She hugged him without saying more. The boy didn't fully understand, but for the first time in days he didn't feel invisible. Emily walked away, without cameras, without applause. She knew the real miracle hadn't been the money. It had been her mother's love, which even after leaving continued caring for her from somewhere, with an old card, a silent promise, and the certainty that the world can still change.